Hey, what's up? Hello, my name is Emma, and today we're going to be talking about audiobooks, if they are real reading or if they are cheating. Now, some people love audiobooks and some people hate them, and that's totally fine. You may feel that they are a passive activity, you can think that you don't retain as much when listening to an audiobook. You are entitled to your own personal opinions on audiobooks. I could honestly make a whole video on why I personally love audiobooks and why they are useful to me, but I wanted to focus today's video on the more concrete aspects of this discussion. So of course, let's get this out of the way. Audiobooks and physical books are the same story. Physical, electronic, and audio copies of the same exact book is the same exact story. That is indisputable. And I feel no one's ever really had an issue when it comes to physical books versus ebooks. The only real discussion is which format do you prefer. I'd say the main discourse about audiobooks is the fact that you read a physical book and you listen to an audiobook. So let's talk a little bit about the science and psychology of reading versus listening, because that seems to be the number one argument. Sorry to burst your bubble, but they aren't all that different. As a note, I don't yet have my official bachelor's degree in psychology, and this portion of the video is going to be focused on what I have done from research, which I have left some links to in the description if you'd like to learn more about this, and as well as my own personal studies in college. So based on the simple view, which was created by Philip Gow and William Tumner, there are two basic parts to reading: decoding and language processing. Decoding is the process of looking at physical words in print and translating them into sound in our heads. When we read, we're actually hearing ourselves read, whether that is out loud or in our heads. From childhood, we can't just look at a word and automatically register what it means, so we have to take these words and turn them into sound through phonics so that they can go through language processing. Now, language processing is basically how we understand language. It is the process our brain goes through in order for us to communicate our thoughts and feelings to other people, and in the case of reading, it is how we understand things like the plot and dialogue, etc. Now, there are a ton of different theoretical perspectives on how we interpret language, whether that be through reading versus listening, but through the simple view, which is what I'm talking about, they're essentially the same thing. The only difference is listening does not require decoding. One of my favorite points from the Daniel Wellington post that I have linked in the description below is the way that he compares the process of reading and listening to transportation. Imagine there are two people that work in the same office. One of them drives to work every day and the other takes public transportation like the train. The person that drives isn't gonna say, "I drove here all by myself and you took a train, that's cheating." Both of them use two different means to get the same exact end result. It happens all the time in life where we all use our own individual means to achieve the same goals. So I don't really understand why some readers have this ridiculous point of view in regards to audiobooks. And also to the people that think that listening to audiobooks is less work or that it's easier because you're able to multitask more with an audiobook, that's also wrong. Studies have shown that by the end of elementary school, decoding has become second nature to us, and it's basically automatic. So we don't actually have to partake in any additional work to achieve that second step. Countless studies have been conducted to prove that listening comprehension and reading comprehension is almost identical in adults. And by adolescence, reading is no additional work compared to listening. So to conclude this lesson, reading follows the same pattern as listening anyways. They aren't exactly identical processes, but to our brain, it is the same exact end result. Honestly, if you consider yourself a reader, but you are more concerned with the anatomy of our brain, cognitive psychology, and basic technicalities, I'm really interested as to why that's more important to you than multiple people being brought together through the same story. Also, related to this misconception that audiobooks are easier, which I have just told you it's not, a lot of people think that audiobooks are a way to read books quicker, and that's cheating, which it is not. If anyone has ever told you that, I highly doubt they've ever actually listened to a full audiobook, because audiobooks are usually so much longer than the time it would take you to read a book physically, even if you increase the speed of the narrator. The very first time I read City of Heavenly Fire, I read it in 8 hours in a physical format, and about 5 rereads later, I listened to it on the audiobook for the first time, and it took me 24 hours, and that is with the speed on 1.5. So no, it's not quicker. Now, my least favorite thing about the statement that audiobooks aren't real reading is that it is incredibly ableist. When I say this, I am in no way suggesting that anyone who has ever said this statement is at their core an ableist person. I am saying the ideology behind audiobooks not being a valid reading experience is ableist. Audiobooks are not just for people like me who use audiobooks to multitask while reading. They're an incredibly useful tool to people with different disabilities who cannot physically read them for a variety of reasons. Easy example, the blind community and people with visual disabilities. These people oftentimes cannot see. They cannot physically interpret words, but that does not mean they are incapable of understanding a story. People with physical disabilities who do not have the ability to hold a book or turn a page. People with neurological diseases like Parkinson's who who cannot hold items most of the time, let alone focused on stable text in order to read due to problems in motor skills. I have a personal connection to this story. I used to work for an agency called Independent Support Services, where I was essentially this extra supportive figure for a girl with disabilities. As a result of a multitude of seizures and follow-up surgeries as a baby, she has significant motor issues and cannot read or write. She is illiterate. No, people in developing countries are not the only people who are illiterate, despite making up the majority of the 28% of the world's population that are illiterate. It can happen in America too. And one of the first times I was actually working with her, I had taken her to a bowling alley to participate in a bowling league for people with disabilities, and I noticed while we were waiting for everyone to arrive that she was listening to an audiobook. She was listening to If I Stay by Gail Forman, which at the time I had recently read. So while we were connecting about this book that we had both just experienced, we realized we have read a lot of the same books, just me physically and her through listening to an audiobook. And I just cannot fathom the thought of somebody telling this girl who has nothing but kindness in her heart and a passion for reading that she is not a real reader because she uses audiobooks to read the same books that we do. You cannot just say, oh, well, like, it's really reading for them, but it doesn't count for people who are able-bodied. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's reading or it's not reading. And it's reading. Reading a book, reading in general, is a privilege, and people who are so vehemently against counting audiobooks as real reading fail to acknowledge that. And it's so frustrating because a lot of these claims of audiobooks being cheating is rooted in the perspective that readers are taking credit for the effort of reading when they haven't, which again is not true, but it unintentionally discredits an entire population of people just because they are utilizing the tools that are available to them. So that's really it for my discussion on if audiobooks are real reading. My verdict is that it is real reading. The process of reading and listening to an audiobook are essentially the same in our brain, and telling people that listening to audiobooks is cheating or not real reading is incredibly ableist. So let me know your thoughts on this discussion. Are audiobooks real reading or are they cheating? And if you feel differently than me, that's fine, but I would really love to know how you address the ableism in your statements, because a lot of times when people do comment similar things on my channel, I bring up the ableism to them and they never reply. So I'm really interested to see how people can possibly rationalize that. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!